My name is Heather Williams. I'm 34, a real estate agent in Chicago, and I've spent my career helping people find their dream homes. But nothing prepared me for the heartbreak of losing the very home I had fought to keep for someone else's dream. For 5 years, I quietly paid my parents' mortgage, determined to keep the house I grew up in, the blue shuttered colonial on Maple Street, safe and in the family. It wasn't extravagant, but it was ours. It held Sunday dinners, backyard barbecues, and a lifetime of memories. Then came my sister Melissa's wedding. I still remember the exact moment. Champagne glass in hand, standing under twinkle lights at the reception, listening to my father's toast. He smiled, lifted his glass, and announced that as their wedding gift, he and my mother were giving Melissa the family home, the one I had been paying for. I froze. My heart sank. My fingers trembled so hard the glass nearly slipped from my grip. Before I tell you how I uncovered the full betrayal, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had your kindness taken for granted by family, drop a like or subscribe. You're not alone. Growing up in suburban Chicago, life felt predictable, safe even. My dad, Richard, worked as an accountant. My mom, Diane, taught third grade. Our home was filled with stability, not luxury. Melissa came along when I was 5, and from the start, I noticed differences. At 10, I was told my birthday party had to be small because money's tight. Months later, Melissa got a bounce house, a face painter, and 20 classmates. The excuses always followed. She's younger. We're doing better now. You're so independent. That so-called independence? It wasn't a gift, it was a survival skill. I started babysitting at 14, stocked grocery shelves at 16, and worked full-time every college break just to stay afloat. Meanwhile, Melissa's only job was to keep her grades up, which she barely did. In college, the divide grew wider. I attended State University on a partial scholarship, juggling 3 jobs to cover the gap. My parents managed $1,500 per semester for me. Melissa, full tuition at a private liberal arts school. She can't handle loans like you can, they said. Still, I didn't complain. I believed in hard work. I built a career, grinding through the housing market crash, surviving on ramen and determination until I got my first big break with a luxury client referral. By 28, I was living in a downtown condo, leasing a new car, and gaining recognition in the Chicago real estate scene. Melissa, meanwhile, drifted from gallery gigs to barista shifts, eventually becoming a part-time yoga instructor. Despite her unstable income, she managed regular brunches, weekend retreats, and an enviable wardrobe thanks to mom and dad. They quietly picked up her bills, covered rent, and helped her stay balanced. Then came the first real family crisis. My father was laid off after 30 years with the same firm. At 58, with limited prospects, he was devastated. Around the same time, my mom was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. Medical bills piled up. When I visited one weekend and saw past due notices tucked under cookbooks, I knew the truth. That night, I made a decision. I told them I'd cover the mortgage, pay for what insurance didn't, and help keep them afloat until things got better. My mom cried. "This house will be yours one day, Heather," she said. "We'll never forget what you're doing." They did forget. Month after month, I wired payments. I fixed the leaky roof, took them to doctor visits, bought groceries. Meanwhile, Melissa floated on, blissfully removed. Then she met Brandon Taylor, wealthy, charming heir to a regional car dealership empire. Their whirlwind romance was plastered all over social media. Private jets, courtside seats, 5-star getaways. Suddenly, my parents had new energy. They hosted dinner parties, took shopping trips with Melissa, even painted the guest room for Brandon's visits. Medical bills and financial stress seemed to disappear, at least where Melissa was concerned. 6 months later, Brandon proposed with a diamond the size of a marble. Wedding planning began immediately. At the engagement party held at the Taylor family's exclusive country club, I felt like an outsider. I wore a classic black dress I normally wore to high-end showings, but there, among couture and champagne flutes, I felt small. Then I heard it. My mother, glowing with pride, telling her circle of new friends, the wedding gift will be perfect. Something they can build their future on. They weren't just giving her a generous gift. They were handing over the very house I had been saving. My house. my memories, my sacrifice. And that's where this story really begins. The group of women around my mother gave polite nods and drifted away as I approached. I turned to her, curious. What wedding gift were you talking about just now? She gave my arm a light pat, her tone airy. Oh, just tossing around ideas. Nothing's been decided yet. Have you tried the crab cakes? They're incredible. Her deflection was obvious. I didn't push, but something in me tightened. Throughout the evening, I kept noticing quiet exchanges between my parents and Brandon's relatives. Soft conversations, deliberate glances, subtle nods. Whatever they were discussing, I wasn't part of it. 2 weeks later, my father called. Could you bump up your monthly contribution a bit? Just temporarily. The roof's looking worn, and we're getting an estimate, need to get ahead of it before winter. Without question, I transferred an extra $2,000. But when I dropped by unexpectedly that weekend, there was no sign of roofing materials or repairs. Instead, I walked in to find my mother and Melissa lounging in the living room, champagne half gone, wedding magazines and fabric swatches spread across the coffee table. Just gathering some inspiration, my mother said quickly, sweeping the materials aside. Nothing extravagant, except I caught a glimpse of the caterer's quote, sitting openly on the table. The per plate cost alone was more than what most people spend on an entire night out. Trying to stay calm, I asked, are we sure the roof is still a priority? Her smile faded. This is Melissa's special day. We've been saving for it. Saving? I asked carefully, already knowing the answer. Since when? You wouldn't understand. My father chimed in from his recliner. Some things are worth stretching for. That ended the conversation, but not my unease. The following week, I met up with my best friend, Rachel. Over lunch, I voiced what had been gnawing at me. Am I overreacting? I mean, it's their money. Technically, Rachel put down her fork, as serious. But it's not just their money. You've kept them afloat for years. Have they ever talked about paying you back? No, I admitted. I never expected that. But I also didn't expect them to suddenly have thousands to burn on a 5-star wedding. Rachel gave me a long look. It sounds like you're enabling them, Heather. Maybe it's time to draw a line. I nodded, even though the idea of confronting my parents about money made my chest tighten. They had raised me. They had needed me. How could I turn that into a transaction now? Still, the red flags multiplied. They turned down dinner invitations, citing tight budgets, but then funded engagement photos at a luxury resort. My mom said she was cutting back therapy due to costs, then excitedly described her custom-made mother of the bride dress. I began noticing I was being quietly excluded. Melissa's bridal shower, cake tastings, venue visits. I only found out about them through Instagram or after the fact mentions. When I asked why, the answers were always the same. We didn't want to bother you. You've been so busy with work. But I was still paying the mortgage, the taxes, their utilities, covering medical expenses. Each month, nearly $3,000 gone, money I had hoped to use for a second property someday. Over 5 years, I had contributed more than $160,000. Then, 6 months before the wedding, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off a birthday gift for my mother. The driveway was empty, but lights were on. I let myself in with my key, calling out casually. The voices in the dining room stopped abruptly. I turned the corner to find my parents sitting with an unfamiliar older man in a suit. Documents were spread across the table. Heather, we weren't expecting you, my mother said quickly, sweeping the papers into a folder. Sorry to interrupt, I said, placing the gift on the sideboard. I just came to drop this off. This is Mr. Patterson, my father said reluctantly, our attorney, just helping us update some paperwork. Mr. Patterson offered a polite nod, saying nothing more. An awkward silence followed until my mother ushered me toward the kitchen. Why don't we get some coffee? She busied herself nervously, straightening mugs, wiping clean countertops. I watched her. Is everything okay? Legal trouble? Not at all, she said quickly, just making sure everything's in order. You know, at our age, it's wise to have things documented. Before I could press, my father entered, oddly upbeat. Good news, Heather. You won't have to worry about the house much longer. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? He shrugged. Just simplifying some things. Nothing to worry about. The conversation shifted to safe topics. Local news, Melissa's wedding, my recent closings. But as I drove home, My father's comment echoed in my mind. You won't have to worry about the house anymore. Something was happening, something major, and I was being left in the dark. The wedding arrived on a flawless June Saturday. The Palmer House Hotel in downtown Chicago was transformed. Thousands of roses, crystal chandeliers, dramatic lighting that probably cost more than my first car. I had been there since dawn, playing the dutiful bridesmaid, managing stylists, calming bridesmaids, tracking down the wedding planner when my sister shrieked about the wrong shade of roses. The champagne isn't even chilled properly, Melissa snapped as I adjusted her veil. And these are cream roses, not ivory. I told them ivory. I bit my tongue, remembering my mother's quiet plea earlier that morning. Please, just help us make this perfect for your sister. So I chilled the champagne. I fixed the flowers. I smiled for the photos. And all the while, I calculated the cost of everything around me and wondered exactly what I had paid for. The ceremony was perfect on the surface. Melissa looked stunning in her designer gown. Brandon was dashing and visibly smitten as they exchanged vows. My parents sat proudly in the front row, my mother dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief, my father grinning like the father of the year. To the outside world, we looked like the perfect American family celebrating a joyful milestone. At the reception, I sat at the family table, quietly sipping a single glass of champagne while making small talk with Brandon's relatives. I needed to stay clear-headed. Something was coming, I could feel it. All through cocktail hour, I watched my parents and Brandon's family share hushed exchanges, sidelong glances, knowing smiles. A surprise announcement was brewing, and I already knew it wouldn't include me. After dinner, my father stood, tapping his glass for attention. The room fell silent. He launched into a heartfelt speech, reflecting on Melissa's childhood, on family legacy, and the pride he felt watching his youngest daughter grow into the woman she'd become. Then came the pivot. And so, he said, voice thick with emotion, your mother and I have decided to give you our home as your wedding gift. The house you grew up in, full of memories, is now yours to build your future. Applause exploded. Across the room, guests murmured about how beautiful and generous the gesture was. Melissa gasped, clutched Brandon's arm and began crying. My mother beamed through her own tears as people congratulated her. I couldn't move. The half-empty flute trembled in my hand. 5 years of mortgage payments, 60 monthly transfers, thousands more for taxes, repairs, insurance, all for a house I'd been promised, handed away without a single conversation. Flashes of memory rushed through my mind. My mother's tearful gratitude the night I offered to help. My father's quiet assurance, it'll be yours someday. Weekend visits spent fixing leaks, painting walls, mowing the lawn. And Melissa? She popped in for holidays, smiled for pictures, and left again. Still, I kept my composure. Through the cake cutting, the toasts, the photos. I even hugged Melissa when she gushed. Isn't it amazing? Our parents are the absolute best. But as the music started and guests spilled onto the dance floor, I slipped out quietly. I didn't drive home. Instead, I drove to their house, or what I now realized was her house. I parked in the driveway and waited. The house loomed quietly in the dark, every window and brick a symbol of years I'd poured into it. Just after midnight, my parents pulled in, still in their formal wear. When they spotted my car, their expressions shifted, first surprise, then resignation. I stepped out. We need to talk. Inside, in a living room still decorated with pre-wedding photos and wrapped gifts, I finally asked the question burning inside me. How could you give away the house I've been paying for without even talking to me? My father sat down, loosening his tie. It's our house, Heather. We appreciated your help, but the deed was always in our name. I stared at him, stunned. Was your name on the checks I wrote every month? The receipts? For the roof? The tax payments? The medical bills? My mother crossed her arms. That was your choice. We never asked you to do all that. You did, I said quietly. You told me I was investing in my future. You told me the house would be mine. My father exhaled. Plans change. Melissa and Brandon need a stable home to start their life. They can't afford this neighborhood. And I could, because I sacrificed to keep this house afloat. You're already successful, my mother said, as if that excused everything. You have your condo, your career. Melissa needs this more. What followed was a slow collapse of everything I thought I understood about my family. They had transferred the deed to months earlier, explaining the mystery meeting with the attorney. The final mortgage payment, about $12,000, had come directly from my recent transfer, money I'd earmarked for their medical bills. They didn't see my help as an investment. They saw it as convenient, disposable. When I mentioned the total I'd spent over 160,000, my father scoffed. That's an exaggeration. And anyway, that's what family does, we support each other. I stood. Apparently, only when the family member is Melissa. And with that, I walked out. I drove home in tears, angry, devastated, disillusioned. Everything I had believed about fairness, about love, about loyalty, it all crumbled. That night, staring out at the Chicago skyline from my condo, I realized something painful. I had never been seen as equal. I had been the dependable one, the one who didn't need protecting, the one they could lean on without offering anything back. The week after the wedding was a blur. I ignored every call and voicemail. Melissa texted once, "Thank you for being part of my special day." As if nothing had happened. I buried myself in work, booked showings nonstop, took every weekend shift. My colleagues thought I was hustling for a vacation, but every open house reminded me of the home I lost, the home I built and kept, alive and never really owned. At night, the silence grew louder. Sleep eluded me. I started tallying numbers in my head, then created a spreadsheet. Every payment, every bill, every repair, every utility and grocery run. The total? Just over $165,000. Seeing it in black and white snapped something in me. I needed clarity. I needed direction. So I booked a meeting with Samantha Ford, a financial advisor recommended by a colleague. She studied my documentation calmly but thoroughly. Was there a written agreement? She finally asked. No, I said. Just a verbal understanding. They said more than once that I was investing in my inheritance. She gave a polite, professional nod, but I saw the answer in her eyes. She gave a professional nod, jotting a few notes. Legally, it's a gray area, she explained. Without written documentation, your options are limited. You could pursue a civil claim based on verbal contract or unjust enrichment, but family cases like these are messy, expensive, and emotionally brutal. I looked at her. What would you do? She didn't hesitate. I'd consider it. A very expensive lesson. Never mix finances and family without legal structure. Stop all financial support immediately. Protect your assets and set firm boundaries going forward. Then decide realistically what kind of relationship you still want with them. It was difficult advice, but it brought the clarity I desperately needed. That evening, I sat at my desk and drafted an email. No emotion, no accusations, just facts. I outlined every payment I had made over 5 years. I restated my understanding of our arrangement, that my contributions were an investment in the home, my future inheritance. And I ended it with a clear message, effective immediately. All financial support was ending. The tone was measured, not angry, but final. Their reply came within hours. My mother's message was long, rambling, and emotionally manipulative. It bounced between defensiveness and guilt-tripping, painting Melissa as fragile and in need of support while portraying me as stable and selfish for withdrawing mine. She brought up everything from "we gave you life" to "you'll understand when you have children." My father's addition was brief. Disappointment that I viewed family through a transactional lens. Neither acknowledged the betrayal. Neither offered repayment. The house wasn't even mentioned directly. Reading between the lines, their message was clear. They expected the same relationship to continue minus my money, of course, with my emotional availability intact. That email confirmed what I already suspected. Nothing would change unless I changed it. Meanwhile, Melissa and Brandon moved into the house straight from their Bali honeymoon. Her Instagram lit up with renovation photos, the kitchen gutted, my mother's beloved backyard garden bulldozed to make space for a hot tub, the laundry room wall, where both our childhood growth charts had been marked in pencil, painted over with trendy sage green. 3 weeks later, Melissa texted, "Making big changes to your old room. Want to come see before the contractors get it completely redone." Photos were attached. My old bedroom, stripped bare. I showed Rachel the message during one of our weekly coffee meetups. She quietly took my phone, blocked Melissa's number, and handed it back. "Not helpful right now," she said. She was right. Distance was the only thing keeping me sane. I stayed no contact through June and into July, focused on rebuilding my financial health, spent time reconnecting with friends I'd neglected while managing my parents' lives. And for the first time in years, I started dreaming again about traveling, starting my own brokerage, maybe even taking a sabbatical. Then came the voicemail that shattered the silence. It was my father, calm, casual. "Hey Heather, it's Dad. Hope you're doing well. Your mother and I have been thinking about our living situation. The house is really too big for us now, and Melissa and Brandon would like their privacy. We're considering options. Let's catch up soon." No apology, no mention of the fallout, just a veiled suggestion. "We need a place to go." I didn't return the call, but it haunted me. Had they really not considered their own housing before gifting their home? Had they believed they'd just stay? A week later, another message this time from my mother. "Sweetheart, we haven't heard from you in ages. We're having a small family dinner this Sunday. We'd really love for you to join us. There are some things we want to discuss about the future." Again, no mention of our falling out, just the same tone they'd always used, summoning me as if nothing had happened. I replied with a polite decline, busy with showings this weekend, but the door had been cracked open. More texts followed, each one hinting at how tight things were, how transitional their situation felt. The implication became clear. They wanted my lake house, the Michigan cottage I'd bought the year before with commissions from. My best quarter ever, my escape, my dream project, my future retirement spot. Before the betrayal, I had even considered offering it to them as a retirement option. But no, the assumption that it would just be theirs was infuriating. And then came the inevitable knock at my door. The doorman called up. My parents were in the lobby. I almost told him to turn them away, but I didn't. They arrived with peace offerings, my mother's lasagna, a bottle of wine we used to share at Christmas. Nostalgia warred with resentment as I let them in and guided them to the dining table, intentionally not offering to take their coats. We made awkward small talk. Weather, my work, Melissa's honeymoon. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "We wanted to talk to you in person about our situation." I said nothing. "As you know, the house is Melissa and Brandon's now," he continued, "and they've asked us to move out by the end of the month." 2 weeks, my mother added, as if the timeline was unreasonable even though they'd had 2 months since the transfer. "We've looked into apartments," my father went on, "but rent is astronomical. And with your mother's health, we need something quiet, accessible." They paused. "We were thinking," my mother said carefully, "about your lake house. It's sitting empty most of the time. The air would be so good for your father's blood pressure." That's when it hit me. They truly believed everything I owned was, by default, theirs to use. That I would keep absorbing the consequences of their decisions. That I would once again clean up the mess. But this time, I didn't rush in. This time, I didn't say yes. There was no acknowledgement of the pain they'd caused. No recognition of the boundaries I'd set. Not even a direct question, just an assumption of entitlement. "The lake house," I repeated slowly. "It's just until we figure something permanent," my father added quickly. 6 months, maybe a year at most. We wouldn't interfere with any rental plans you have for peak season." I thought about the lake house, a modest 3-bedroom cottage on a quiet Michigan lake, purchased entirely with my own savings after years of careful planning. The weekends spent painting walls, replacing fixtures, furnishing it with thoughtfully chosen pieces. The rental income that supplemented my commissions during slow periods. The sanctuary I retreated to when city life felt overwhelming. "That won't be possible," I said finally. My mother's hopeful expression shifted to confusion. "What do you mean?" "I mean, no, you can't stay at my lake house." "But it's just sitting empty most of the time," she persisted, as if I hadn't understood her point. "That's irrelevant. It's my property, bought with my money, and I'm not willing to change how I use it." My father leaned forward, brow furrowed. "Heather, you're being unnecessarily dramatic. This is family helping family. After everything they'd done for me." The audacity of that statement cracked through my carefully maintained composure. "After everything I've done for you," I shot back. 5 years of mortgage payments, property taxes, repairs, all made with the understanding that I was investing in my future inheritance. An inheritance you gave away to Melissa without a single conversation with me. "That's water under the bridge," my mother said dismissively. We need to focus on current solutions. The current solution, I said firmly, is that you find an apartment you can afford, just like any other adult would. They exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for my resistance. My father softened his tone, the one he used when negotiating. Look, I understand you're still upset about the house, but this is different. We're not asking for the lake house, we just want to stay temporarily. I need time to think, I said, standing to signal the conversation was over. I'll let you know my decision later this week. After they left, I called Rachel immediately. She arrived 30 minutes later with Julia Stevens and a bottle of tequila. As I recounted the visit, their expressions shifted from disbelief to outrage. The absolute nerve, Rachel said, pouring another round. They give away a house you've been paying for, then expect to move into your vacation home? In what universe? Does that make sense? Julia nodded vigorously. My father tried something similar after my parents divorced, gave their savings to my brother's failing business, then expected to move in with me when he couldn't afford his apartment. These patterns don't change unless you set clear, firm boundaries. Exactly, Rachel agreed. Boundaries they understand, unmovable, with consequences. Together, we drafted my response, a firm but respectful refusal. It acknowledged their situation but made clear I would not offer my lake house as temporary or permanent housing, resume any financial support, continue any relationship that didn't include recognition of their betrayal and concrete steps toward amends. 3 days later, I met my parents at a neutral location, a coffee shop midway between our homes. The public setting was deliberate, minimizing chances for an emotional scene. I arrived early and chose a corner table that offered privacy without isolation. They arrived together, my mother scanning anxiously, my father confident as usual. I was professional and prepared, notes in hand, setting the tone immediately. This was a negotiation, not a family chat. I've considered your request, I began after brief greetings. My answer is no, I will not offer the lake house as a residence, either temporarily or permanently. My mother's face fell. But where are we supposed to go? That's a question you should have asked before giving away your home, I replied evenly. There are many apartments available within your budget, especially if you consider suburbs further from the city center. My father's voice rose, edged with anger. We raised you better than this. Family takes care of family. I agree, I said firmly. For 5 years, I took care of my family, paying your mortgage, property taxes, and medical bills. That commitment ended when you gave away the house without consulting me and used my money to clear the remaining mortgage for Melissa's benefit. I slid a folder across the table, filled with printouts of rental listings, all within there. Price range. These are all available immediately and fit your income. I also included information about senior housing developments offering amenities suited to their needs. My mother pushed the folder away without even glancing at it. We're not seniors, she said sharply. We're your parents, people who need help during a transition you caused by giving away our stable home. I held firm. I'm setting a boundary. I will not provide housing for you, nor will I resume financial support. Any future relationship depends on your acknowledging how your actions hurt me and taking steps to make amends. My father's face reddened at my words. So that's it? You're turning your back on family because of money? This isn't about money, I said evenly. It's about respect, consideration, and honesty, things that were missing when you made decisions affecting me without any discussion. For another 20 minutes, the conversation cycled through familiar patterns. They minimized my feelings, invoked family obligation, and framed their actions as normal parental prerogative. I stayed calm but resolute, eventually standing to end the discussion. My decision is final, I said. I hope you find suitable housing soon. The fallout was swift and wide-reaching. That evening, Melissa called from a new number, bypassing my block. Her voice trembled with indignation as she accused me of leaving our parents homeless and being jealous of her happiness. When I tried to explain, she cut me off. Brandon and I would never treat family this way, she snapped before hanging up. Extended family took sides after my parents shared their carefully edited version. Aunts and uncles who had never shown interest suddenly sent messages questioning my character and lecturing about family loyalty. Cousins I barely knew posted vague social media messages about supporting parents in their golden years, clearly aimed at me. I responded once, sending a group email to the extended family. I detailed the 5 years of financial support I'd provided and explained the circumstances around the house transfer. The message ended with a request for privacy during this family matter and a clear statement that I would not engage in further public discussion. Then I blocked numbers, muted social media accounts, and focused on rebuilding my life free from unfair expectations. The initial pain was intense, but each day brought more clarity about the unhealthy dynamics I'd accepted for years. For perhaps the first time, I prioritized my well-being over others' unreasonable demands. It felt like finally breathing after being underwater for years. 2 months passed with minimal contact. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned my parents had found a 2-bedroom apartment 15 miles from their former home. Melissa's renovation updates slowed, hinting her initial excitement had faded. My life settled into new rhythms. I retreated more often to my lake house, invested in friendships neglected during years of family obligation, and renewed my focus on career growth. Without constant demands, I rediscovered old interests: weekend painting classes, a book club, even casual dating for the first time in years. Therapy shifted from crisis management to long-term personal development. Most importantly, I began to recognize the patterns in my family dynamics: my tendency to overfunction, difficulty setting boundaries, and habit of putting others' needs before my own. Work success followed. In September, I won a competitive listing for a historic mansion, conversion, and multiple luxury condos in a landmark building. The commission would significantly boost my annual income, validating my choice to focus on career rather than ongoing family support. One crisp October morning, as I reviewed marketing materials in my downtown office, my assistant knocked hesitantly. "There's a Richard Williams here to see you," she said. "No appointment. He says he's your father." My first instinct was to refuse, but something in her expression made me pause. "How does he seem?" She seemed nervous, maybe a little sad. "He said he understands if you're busy but hopes you might have time for lunch." His unexpected visit intrigued me. My father had always preferred phone calls for difficult conversations. Showing up in person suggested this was serious. "Tell him I can spare 30 minutes, I said. "If it goes well, we can continue over lunch." When he entered, he looked older than I remembered. His normally impeccable appearance was slightly rumpled, shirt a bit creased, hair less neat, new lines around his eyes. He carried a small gift bag, which he placed carefully on my desk. "Your mother's homemade brownies," he said awkwardly. I remembered they're your favorite. I thanked him but didn't open the bag, instead motioning toward the visitor's chair. "This is unexpected," I said. "I've wanted to talk for weeks but wasn't sure you'd call." He sat down, hands fidgeting uncharacteristically. "Things haven't been right since the wedding." "Since before that?" "Really?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "No, they haven't," he admitted. He took a deep breath. "I've come to apologize, Heather. I made terrible mistakes that hurt you deeply, and I need to take responsibility." His directness surprised me. He rarely admitted fault, usually reframing things to maintain his position. I stayed silent, letting him continue. "The house situation was handled terribly. You deserved consultation, respect, and gratitude for everything you contributed. Instead, we excluded you and dismissed your feelings afterward." "Why?" I asked, the question burning inside me for months. He sighed. "Your mother orchestrated most of it, and I failed to stand up for what was right." The longer answer is complicated. Over the next hour, he revealed things I hadn't known. My mother had always favored Melissa, seeing in her the social success she never achieved herself. When Brandon appeared with wealth and family connections, she was determined to secure the relationship, believing a grand wedding gift would impress his family and cement Melissa's place. "I knew it was wrong," my father said, "especially after everything you'd done for us." I suggested alternatives: help with a down payment on another house, financial support that wouldn't affect your inheritance, but your mother was fixated on giving them the family home. "And you went along with it." "I did. That's my failure entirely." His voice cracked. "I spent my life avoiding conflict with your mother, even when it meant treating you unfairly. That pattern goes back to your childhood. I never had the courage to break it." His honesty was both validating and painful. My feelings of being less valued weren't imagined, they were real. The favoritism was intentional, not accidental. "What's changed now? Why apologize after all?" This time, several things. Living in the apartment gave me perspective on what we lost and what we took from you. Melissa and Brandon are already having problems, making me question the sacrifice. Most importantly, I started therapy on my own. It's helping me see patterns I was blind to before." He reached across the desk, stopping just short of touching my hand, bridging some of the distance between us. "I don't expect immediate forgiveness, Heather. What we did caused real harm. I just want you to know I recognize that now and I'm working to be better." The lunch that followed felt like a conversation with a new man, not the father I'd known. He asked thoughtful questions about my work, my friends, my interests, things he rarely cared about before. He shared updates about his part-time consulting and new social connections in their apartment community. Most notably, he mentioned attending social events without my mother, developing a sense of independence that had been absent from their relationship. "What about Mom?" I finally asked as we finished our meals. "Does she share your perspective on everything that happened?" His expression tightened. "Not entirely. She admits we handled things poorly, but she still believes the decision itself was the right one. She's struggling with the consequences, both the reduced living situation and your distance." "I can't resume a relationship that doesn't acknowledge the core problem," I said firmly. "I understand," he replied. "I'm working on her, but ultimately her journey is separate from mine. I'm here because I need to make things right, regardless of her choices." We parted with a tentative plan to meet monthly for lunch, a small step toward rebuilding trust without diving back into full family involvement. Watching him walk away, his posture straighter than when he arrived, I felt a complicated mix of emotions: lingering hurt, but also a cautious hope that genuine change might be possible. 2 weeks later, my mother reached out, not with the heartfelt apology my father had offered, but with a stiff invitation to lunch at her favorite restaurant. I accepted, setting clear boundaries. No talk of financial help, no pressure about family obligations, just a chance to begin addressing our fractured relationship. The lunch was difficult. My mother arrived impeccably dressed as always, her armor of perfect appearance firmly in place. Her greeting was warm but controlled, lacking any vulnerability. "Your father says I need to acknowledge the misunderstanding about the house," she began after we'd ordered. "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I corrected gently. "It was a betrayal of trust and an erasure of my contributions." She flinched slightly but pressed on. "Perhaps we didn't handle it as transparently as we should have. For that, I apologize." The words were right, but the sentiment felt hollow. Throughout the meal, she maintained the narrative that giving Melissa the house was the correct decision, poorly executed, but not fundamentally wrong. She acknowledged I was hurt, but stopped short of taking responsibility for causing that pain. "Families go through difficult periods," she concluded as dessert was cleared. "I hope we can move forward now." It wasn't the reconciliation I'd hoped for, but it was a small step. My mother had made an effort, however limited, to repair the relationship. I could acknowledge that while maintaining my boundaries and continuing to evaluate whether deeper healing was possible. Meanwhile, signs of trouble in Melissa's perfect life began surfacing on social media. The enthusiastic renovation posts gave way to vague mentions of challenges and growth opportunities. A mutual acquaintance mentioned overhearing arguments at a dinner party at their house. Brandon was photographed alone at a charity event, standing noticeably close to his ex-girlfriend. The house itself started showing neglect. One evening, driven by curiosity, I drove past and noticed peeling paint on the shutters, overgrown landscaping, and a broken gutter that looked damaged for some time. The home, once meticulously cared for during my parents' ownership with significant financial help from me, was visibly deteriorating under my sister's care. I took no pleasure in these signs, but they gave context to my father's next visit. Over coffee at a neighborhood cafe, he shared that Brandon's family business was under investigation for tax irregularities, causing financial strain in their marriage. "They've started arguing about money," he explained. "Melissa expected Brandon's family to cover renovation costs, but with these legal troubles, that support vanished. Now they're facing contractor bills with limited resources." "That's unfortunate," I said neutrally. "Your mother is finally seeing things more clearly," he continued. "She built up this fantasy that Melissa marrying into wealth meant security and stability. Now she's watching that crumble and realizing she sacrificed her relationship with you for it." His insight explained my mother's unexpected call the following week, a voicemail with audible tears. asking if we could talk again. Our subsequent conversation, still guarded on both sides, contained her first genuine acknowledgement of wrongdoing. I convinced myself that helping Melissa secure her future was worth any cost, she admitted. I didn't allow myself to see how unfair that was to you. I'm truly sorry. The words I'd longed to hear for months arrived, though not with the complete healing I'd imagined. The apology mattered, but rebuilding trust would require more than words. Still, it opened a door I thought had been closed. A new relationship with my parents based on mutual respect, rather than obligation and exploitation, felt possible. Instead of the usual brief updates or half-hearted attempts at reconciliation, her message was a lengthy, thoughtful reflection on our family history. She acknowledged patterns from her own upbringing that she had unknowingly repeated, admitted the harm caused by her favoritism, and expressed sincere remorse over the betrayal involving the house. I convinced myself I was doing what was best for the family, she wrote, but in truth, I was protecting my own ideal of what our family should be. That vision cost me my relationship with my remarkable eldest daughter, a price I now realize was far too high. The email ended with a request for family therapy, not to erase the past, but to build healthier patterns for the future. After consulting with my individual therapist, I agreed to a trial session, cautiously hopeful but determined to maintain firm boundaries. To my surprise, the first session was productive. Guided by the therapist, my father expanded on insights from his own therapy. For perhaps the first time, my mother listened without defensiveness, and I voiced long-suppressed feelings openly without either downplaying them or expressing uncontrolled anger. We left with homework, communication exercises, reflection, questions, and a commitment to continue the work. Progress was slow and uneven. Some sessions brought breakthroughs. Others fell into familiar patterns, needing the therapist's intervention to steer us back. Gradually, though, new understanding began to emerge. My parents took fuller responsibility for the impact of their actions, while I gained insight into the complex motivations behind their choices beyond simple favoritism. Together, we identified healthier ways to relate, always respecting the boundaries I had set. During this time, my personal life blossomed. A chance introduction through a colleague led me to Jake Thompson, an architectural photographer whose work complemented my real estate expertise. Our relationship grew with refreshing honesty, clear communication about expectations, mutual respect for our careers, and a shared love of quiet evenings over frenetic socializing. Most importantly, Jake respected my boundaries. When I explained my complicated family situation and the need for protective limits, he listened without judgment or pressure. His own experiences with difficult family dynamics gave him natural empathy, while his healthy relationship with his parents offered a model of balanced adult family ties. By the following Christmas, 18 months after the wedding that fractured our family, we had found a new normal. Holiday dinner was at my home, a neutral space instead of my parents' apartment or Melissa's house. Gift exchanges were modest and thoughtful, avoiding extravagance. Conversations stayed within agreed boundaries, steering clear of triggers that might reignite old conflicts. Melissa and Brandon attended, their strained relationship barely masked by attempts at holiday cheer. The house that had been the epicenter of our family drama was now on the market. Their marriage, burdened by financial stress and unresolved resentment, was unraveling. No one spoke the irony aloud, but my father's knowing glance across the table said enough: lessons learned too late. Looking back over this turbulent journey from betrayal to tentative healing, I see now that the house was never the real issue. It merely crystallized patterns rooted deep in my childhood, an imbalanced family system, unequal expectations, and the dismissal of my needs in favor of my sister's wants. That painful experience forced me to confront these dynamics, which might otherwise have persisted indefinitely. It created space for growth amid the hurt. The greatest lesson emerged slowly: true family relationships cannot be bought with financial support or maintained by obligation alone. Authentic connection demands mutual respect, honest communication, and recognition of each person's value. Beyond material contributions, my financial support had created a false sense of closeness that collapsed when interests clashed. Equally vital was learning that boundaries aren't selfish, they're essential for healthy relationships. By clearly defining what I would and wouldn't accept, I made room for genuine healing rather than a superficial truce. Those boundaries allowed me to stay connected to my parents while protecting myself from further exploitation of balance, benefiting everyone. Perhaps the most important realization was that advocating for myself didn't mean abandoning compassion. I could stand firm in my worth while still understanding my parents' limitations. Their actions caused real pain, but recognizing the complex factors behind them helped me move toward forgiveness without sacrificing accountability. Today, as I build my life with intention instead of obligation, I understand family relationships require ongoing care, not assumed permanence. The bonds we share deserve nurturing through respect and clear communication, not blind loyalty regardless of treatment. This understanding shapes all my relationships with family, friends, colleagues, and partners. The journey continues with setbacks and progress alike. Some family gatherings still stir old patterns. Some conversations remain carefully navigated. But the foundation has shifted from unquestioned sacrifice to balanced reciprocity, creating space for authentic connection, not role-playing. If my story resonates, I encourage you to examine your own family's unspoken expectations. Are you giving out of genuine love or obligation? Are your efforts acknowledged and reciprocated? Most importantly, do your family dynamics support your growth or limit it? The answers may reveal patterns worth addressing before they lead to painful confrontation. What family expectations have challenged you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? Please share your experiences below. If this story helped you see unhealthy patterns in your relationships, like and subscribe for more on family dynamics and personal growth. Remember, prioritizing your well-being isn't selfish, it's the foundation for truly healthy connections. Thank you for joining me on this journey.